Hey guys, it's me again tonight. We're taking a sleepy shuffle through one of the noisiest, most exhausting cities in modern history, 1920s Berlin. And let me warn you, you probably won't survive this. Not because of war or famine, though there's plenty of both, but because your modern nerves would absolutely melt under the pressure of this chaotic, glamorous mess. You arrive under a sky smeared with electric light and tobacco haze. Neon signs buzz in fractured colors as the midnight tram lurches through Friedrichstrasse, its wooden seats polished by thousands of tired backsides. The air smells like hot rails, cheap perfume, and currywurst. Yes, currywurst already exists. Your boots clack over wet cobblestones, slipping slightly as you cross into a part of the city locals call the hedonist heart. The buildings here lean, slightly centuries-old bones, covered in ads for film, toothpaste, and absinthe. Music leaks from every cracked door. Slow jazz, on upright pianos, phonograph waltzes, and someone badly attempting a Charleston in an attic apartment above. There's a couple slow dancing in the street, drunk in love or both. Their laughter echoes, and you suddenly feel overdressed and underpaid. A tram screeches behind you too close. You jump and nearly land in a puddle of something that might have once been beer. Welcome to Weimar, Berlin, the city where sleep is optional and deodorant is not. A gaunt man offers you a flower. A child runs past you holding a lit cigarette. You're still trying to figure out the exchange rate, which might as well be a joke. The Deutschmark inflated so badly last year that bread cost more than rent. Historians still argue whether it was incompetence or sabotage that drove it. You clutch your bag tighter, not because you're paranoid, but because you've already been warned 3 times by very polite people that pickpockets here are more professional than bankers. A neon-lit cinema advertises Metropolis. The poster's eerie robot face stares at you like it knows your browser history. You consider going in, but the ticket clerk is asleep behind glass, and you realize you're the only one standing still. Berlin is a treadmill that never stops. You try to speak to a police officer, asking for directions in your best German. He stares at you like you've just confessed to murder. "Nicht mein Bezirk," he mutters. "Not my district," and walks off chewing something suspiciously like chalk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. People here all over the world. Leave me a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. And maybe why you're still awake. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck under a peeling street poster of a mustachioed cabaret star and continue trudging. The lights don't so much guide you as chase you. You finally find your lodging, a boarding house tucked between a clock shop and a suspiciously loud dentist's office. The landlady greets you with a yawn and a bill, but no keys. Just a warning not to flush the toilet after midnight. Something about the neighbor. You don't ask, you climb the stairs to your room. Each step creaks in protest as if objecting to your very presence. A naked bulb swings overhead, casting long shadows like arms reaching out. Inside the room, the wallpaper peels like onion skin. The bed is lumpy, the sink gurgles. You sit. Exhale. The city outside keeps roaring. and you've only been here 20 minutes. You wake up to shouting. Not alarm clock shouting, no, this is Berlin shouting. It leaks through your walls and rattles your window pane. Someone outside is selling newspapers at full volume. Another is screaming in song. Somewhere a goat bleats. You rub your eyes and wonder if it was all a dream. It wasn't. The room still smells faintly of boiled cabbage and coal smoke. You grope around for coffee. There is none. You stumble downstairs and into the street, desperate for caffeine and maybe some peace. You're quickly reminded that Berlin doesn't do peace. It does volume. The bakery down the block has a line already mostly made up of old women in headscarves and overcoats muttering about the quality of the morning's rye. You step into a corner cafe hopeful. It's dark, smoky, and almost charming until you try to order. You've been practicing German, sure, but no textbook prepared you for Berlinerisch. You ask for a black coffee. The server raises an eyebrow so high it might detach. Schwatten, he repeats, as if testing you. You nod. He turns muttering Touristen. A few men at the next table laugh, and you realize your accent betrayed you immediately, and you haven't even asked where the sugar is. Berliners in the 1920s spoke fast and sharp. Their vowels clipped their consonants bitten off like a schnitzel crust. Some dialects had Prussian hardness. Others leaned sloppily into cabaret slang. One moment you're listening to a poet lamenting the death of language, and the next you're being told your shoelaces make you look hinterwäldlerisch, a bumpkin. The thing is, no one here slows down for foreigners. Not because they're unfriendly, but because they're late. Always. Everyone is late for something. A performance, a political rally, an affair. Historians still argue whether Berliners were truly rude or just efficient in a world that wouldn't wait for them. Your coffee arrives. It's blacker than the coal under your bed and strong enough to restart your heart. You sip. You regret. But you keep drinking. A man beside you slams his cup down and launches into a story about the French stealing his wife or his hat. You can't tell. Another man yells back something about the Kaiser. Then someone calls the Republic a joke. A woman in the corner shrugs and lights a cigarette with the casual flair of someone who's probably been arrested more than once. You try to blend in, you fail. The city smells your hesitation like blood in the water. You step back into the street, ears ringing. A boy on a bicycle almost hits you. Aus dem Weg. Penner. He shouts something between move and get lost. Hobo. You blink. Berlin loves its insults, almost as much as it loves its newspapers. Speaking of which, you glance at the headlines. Even they shout, "Murder in the Tiergarten, prices rise again. Spy caught in opera house." Every font is bold. Every word is war. You duck into a bookshop, hoping for silence. No such luck. A woman is debating with the bookseller over the ethics of Brecht. He's a fraud, she insists. He's a genius, counters someone else. You realize no one is buying books. They're here to argue. Berlin cafes and shops weren't just stores. They were battlegrounds of opinion salons of everyday revolution. Back on the street, your ears adjust. Slowly, You start to pick up patterns in the noise. The tram screeches every 7 minutes. The newspaper boys harmonize accidentally. Even the chaos has rhythm. Then you hear a sound more terrifying than any your stomach growling. Food. Right. You consider a sausage from a stand, but the man selling it looks like he hasn't blinked since the Treaty of Versailles. You settle on a crust of bread from a woman who glares at your coins like you just insulted her ancestors. The bread's stale, the butter's imaginary, but you're grateful. Because for a moment, chewing in a doorway while pigeons argue above you, you start to feel like a local. Then someone tells you your coat is on backward. And you remember again that Berlin isn't here to make you comfortable. You head toward the market square coins in your pocket and dread in your heart. You've heard stories everyone has about the money here. It's not that things are expensive, it's that money means nothing and everything. At the same time, you pass a boy pushing a wheelbarrow full of paper bills. He's 8, maybe 9, and he's sweating like a man who just robbed a bank. Only he didn't rob anyone. He's just carrying his family's grocery budget for the week. A loaf of bread costs more than his father made in a month before the war. You glance down at your own stack of cash, freshly exchanged at the train station, and feel a twinge of hope. It looks impressive. Thick, substantial, like maybe you could buy a meal and a pair of gloves. But by the time you reach the market and ask for apples, the vendor laughs. That was this morning's price, she says. Try again tomorrow. Hyperinflation has no manners. Historians still argue whether the government printed too much money out of desperation or if it was part of a calculated political gamble. Either way, your rent just tripled between breakfast and lunch. You try to bargain, but your German collapses. The vendor offers you a potato for your watch. You hesitate. It's a nice watch. But also a potato. You walk away hungry and increasingly aware of how fast your money is melting in your pocket, like butter on a summer tram seat. Around you, Berliners have adapted. Price boards are updated hourly with chalk. Wages are paid daily, sometimes twice, so families can buy food before their paychecks lose value. Children play with stacks of useless marks, like building blocks. And everyone counts coins with the fury of a mathematician and the hopelessness of a poet. A man on the corner offers to sell you cigarettes. Only 1 million, he grins. You laugh. He doesn't. He's serious. You wonder if he takes layaway. At a cafe, you overhear a woman reminiscing about when a cup of coffee cost a single coin. Now I need 2 loaves of cash. She sighs. Not loaves of bread. Loaves of bills. You want to correct her, but she's not wrong. You try a bank. Maybe someone there can explain. The teller hands you a note that looks like Monopoly money and says new notes arrive next week. You ask how long they'll last. She shrugs. Until someone sneezes. Outside, the city swirls with contradictions. Artists throw lavish parties while nurses can't afford shoes. A beggar plays Schubert on a piano with 3 keys missing. And you hear rumors, always rumors, about people burning cash in stoves because firewood costs more than money. You pass a newspaper stand. The headlines now say bread price quadruples again. Rich flee to Switzerland. Poor sell their walls. You pause. Surely that's a mistranslation. But then you see it, a woman scraping wallpaper into a bucket. Glue has calories, apparently. You sigh, stepping into a pawn shop, just to get out of the wind. The owner looks up, and without asking, gestures to the sign, "We no longer accept buttons." teeth or promises. You dig out your last few bills and buy something hot and unidentifiable in a bowl. It could be soup. It could be revenge. You slurp it anyway. A man beside you raises his glass and toasts to the fall of the mark. You clink anyway. What else can you do? And as you slouch out into the wet Berlin afternoon, you realize something strange. The city is broke, yes, but it's also alive. People are laughing, bargaining, hustling. The absurdity of it all is almost a source of pride. Berlin is broke, bruised, and breathless, but never boring. And neither now are you. By the time you return to your room, the air inside is warmer than outside, but not in a cozy way. More like soup, steamed socks. The radiator is a rusted relic, hissing with resentment. It gives off heat in short, angry bursts, then settles back into cold silence. You don't trust it, and it doesn't trust you. The wallpaper still peels, curling like old parchment. You notice a stain on the ceiling that seems to be watching you. You wave at it. It doesn't wave back. You try to open a window for fresh air, but it sticks. When it finally budges, it groans so loudly you startle the pigeons on the ledge. They stare at you with the judgmental scorn of lifelong Berliners. One of them might be your landlord. The hallway smells of boiled cabbage. Again. Or still. Hard to say. Every other tenant seems to be making the same dish at the same time with exactly the same lack of seasoning. The scent clings to your coat, your hair, your dreams. This is a Metzgesern Berlin's infamous rental barracks, built for a city that was growing faster than it could breathe. These multi-story tenement buildings are packed tight with families, workers, students, and the occasional revolutionary. You have one room and share a toilet with 6 other people you've never seen. You know they exist, though, because someone keeps leaving poems on the windowsill and stealing your soap. You take the rickety stairs down to the shared washroom. A pipe leaks rhythmically into a stained bucket. There's no light bulb, only a cracked mirror and the faint smell of lye. You splash cold water on your face and brace for the evening. Your neighbor across the hall opens his door. He's in his 60s, wearing a vest and no shoes, holding a violin with one broken string. He looks you in the eye for a beat too long, then shuts the door without a word. You hear him playing something mournful a few minutes later. Or maybe it's just how he practices. Historians still argue whether these living conditions were the result of poor planning or calculated exploitation by landlords who made fortunes squeezing 20 people into a 5-room flat. Either way, privacy is a myth, quiet a fantasy. You sit on your lumpy bed and try to read. You picked up a book earlier, something by Doblin, but your eyes keep drifting. The springs in the mattress poke at odd angles. You shift. One spring pokes back. You both reach an agreement, mutual discomfort. Someone down the hall starts singing. Badly. You assume it's a folk song, but it might just be crying in E minor. A couple next door is arguing about politics. Or cheese. Possibly both. Above you, someone's child drops a marble. It rolls for hours. You never find out where it goes. The room darkens. A flickering street lamp outside throws shadows across your wall that look like dancers or maybe rioters. It's hard to tell in Berlin. You unwrap your meager dinner bread pickles and a sausage you're pretty sure was alive yesterday. You chew slowly, listening to the building settle. With its nightly groans, it creaks like it remembers things it can't forget. And yet, oddly, you begin to settle in. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's consistent. The same clanking radiator, the same shouting couple, the same faint smell of onions. In places, onions should not be. There's a rhythm to it. You're learning the steps. Then the toilet flushes, loudly, violently. And you remember the landlady's warning. Not after midnight. The neighbor with the violin opens his door again. You freeze. He narrows his eyes. You flushed, didn't you? He says. You don't answer. He slowly closes the door. The violin resumes. You decide not to brush your teeth tonight. Too risky. You curl up on your lumpy mattress, pull the itchy blanket over your head, and close your eyes. Outside, the city howls. Inside, the pigeons coo, a lullaby of mild disappointment. And in your dream, the wallpaper finally peels all the way off, revealing a message, noch ein Jahrhundert, dann wird alles besser. Just another century and things will improve. Morning comes, but not gently. You're jolted awake by two sounds. A tram screeching like an angry banshee, and someone in the courtyard, loudly reciting political slogans. You peek through the curtain. It's not a protest yet. It's just breakfast in Berlin. Your stomach growls. Time for food. Again. You follow the scent of frying lard to a small cafe tucked beneath a half-collapsed archway. It has 5 tables, 2 chairs, and 1 very loud radio. Inside, a trio of old men is already deep in debate. One slams his fist on the table, kein Gott, kein Kaiser, kein Vaterland. No God, no emperor, no fatherland. A bold start to a Tuesday. You order something cheap, black bread and questionable cheese, and scan the room. The walls are yellowed with years of smoke, and posters no one bothers taking down. One promises a brighter future with socialism. Another advertises a ballet performance sponsored by the Prussian Rifle Club. The aesthetic is post-collapse optimism. As you chew, a voice behind you says, "It's all politics now, isn't it?" You turn. The speaker is a middle-aged woman in a wool coat, patched at the elbows, pouring sugar, actual sugar, into her tea like it's a luxury drug. "This cafe used to be quiet," she adds, "before the monarchists started bringing pigeons." You blink. She gestures out the window where 2 men in stiff military coats argue with a red-faced teenager waving a newspaper. A pigeon lands on the teen's head. No one reacts. Welcome to public discourse in Weimar, Berlin. Every breakfast is a battleground. The cafe tables double as podiums. The waitresses know Marx better than the university students. And everyone is convinced their side has the moral upper hand. Even the pigeons. You try not to pick a side. But it's impossible. Someone eventually asks what you think about the Treaty of Versailles. You mumble something about difficult times. They nod solemnly. You've passed. Historians still argue whether Berlin's political chaos was the seed of democratic resilience or the compost for something far darker. In 1920s cafes, the battle lines weren't just drawn, they were buttered and served with tea. A man with a limp and a monocle calls out, "It's all theater now. Politics is cabaret." Everyone chuckles. Then someone hurls a crust of bread at him. You duck instinctively. It misses, but barely. You retreat to the back of the cafe, where it's marginally quieter. There, a boy is sketching something on a napkin. Sharp lines, angry eyes, a figure with a crown of sausages. You ask if he's an artist. "No," he says. "I'm 12. Berlin has no time for childhood. You finish your meal and try to slip out unnoticed. A man follows you to the door and hands you a pamphlet. You don't read it. You just nod. It could be anarchist poetry or a new menu. Hard to tell. Back outside, the street is no calmer. A group of students marches past, singing about liberty. A rival group yells back about tradition. Someone nearby is lecturing pigeons on Nietzsche. You walk faster. By the time you reach the newspaper stand, your heart is racing. You buy a copy of Berliner Tageblatt, just to have something to hold in your hands. Today's front page. Cabinet collapses again. In smaller print, horoscopes favor Geminis. You read both. A street preacher shouts about the end of the world. A child corrects his Latin. You decide you've had enough breakfast. You head toward the Tiergarten for a walk, hoping for silence. On the way, a woman hands you a communist flyer. A man offers you an anti-communist flyer. They nod politely to each other, then keep walking. Only in Berlin do ideological enemies share printing costs. The park is quiet for about 4 minutes. Then a brass band starts playing on a nearby path. You sit on a bench chewing the last of your crusty bread, listening to a march you don't recognize. The pigeons follow you. Of course. You sigh. You're full, slightly confused, and more politically aware than you've ever wanted to be before noon. Congratulations. You just survived breakfast in 1920s Berlin. Your tooth starts aching around noon. Not a dull, ignorable throb, more like a flashing red alert somewhere deep in your jaw, the kind that turns each heartbeat into a dental drumbeat. You pretend it'll go away. It doesn't. You ask someone for a dentist. They laugh. You want a good one or a cheap one? You consider the price of soup this morning and say cheap. A few blocks later, you find yourself standing in front of a squat building with a crooked sign that reads Zahnarzt Edelmann. Edelmann means nobleman, which is ironic because the door has a crack running down the middle and the waiting room smells like boiled shoes. Inside, the receptionist doesn't look up. She just says, 2 marks if you scream, 3 if you don't. You hand over your cash and sit. The walls are lined with newspapers. Not for reading, there's no silence here, but to cover up plaster that's been crumbling since the Kaiser's mustache was still fashionable. You wait beside a woman holding an ice pack to her face, and a man quietly weeping over a lost molar. When your name is called, or at least your general shape is pointed at you, step into the examination room. There are no bright lights or smooth jazz. Just a chair that squeaks when you move and a dentist with hands like fireplace pokers. He doesn't ask what's wrong. He just nods, shines a torch in your mouth, and says, "Ah," the usual. You try to ask what that means, but he's already lowering the drill. Now a note on 1920s dentistry. It wasn't dentistry, it was survival. Anesthetic was rare, and when available, it was often just schnapps and wishful thinking. You get neither. The drill whirs to life, a sound that will haunt your dreams, and the dentist begins. You grip the chair, try not to bite him, and wonder if this is how soldiers felt in the trenches. Historians still argue whether interwar Berlin had worse dental hygiene or worse dental technique. Based on this moment, you're leaning toward both. Halfway through, the dentist pauses and hums a waltz. You try to match the tempo with your breathing. It doesn't help. He resumes drilling with renewed enthusiasm. You feel every vibration in your spine. Then, as suddenly as it started, it's over. He says something cheerful in a dialect you don't understand, wipes your chin with a napkin, and hands you a boiled sweet. For the pain, he says. You can't tell if he means the sweet causes the pain or relieves it. Back on the street, your jaw throbs in sympathy with the cobblestones. You pass a mirror in a shop window and catch your reflection. Your face is pale, your eyes wide, and your hair now has what can only be described as trauma volume. You wander until you find a bench near a tram stop and collapse onto it. An old man sitting nearby looks at you and simply nods. "Dentist?" he asks. You nod. He offers you a cigarette. You decline, not because you don't want one, but because you're not sure your mouth still functions. A tram rumbles by, trailing sparks. You don't move. After a while, you stand up and stagger toward a pharmacy. The pharmacist offers something in a brown bottle with no label. "Will it help, you ask?" She shrugs. "Depends what you mean by help." You drink it anyway. It tastes like regret and herbs. As you shuffle back toward your apartment, you pass a small crowd gathered around a street performer. He's juggling knives. One lands point down in a crate of turnips. The crowd cheers. You try to smile. It comes out as a wince. Inside your building, the violinist is playing again. A sad, slow tune. Maybe he had a dental appointment too. You collapse onto your mattress. The pillow smells like dust and someone else's dreams. You close your eyes. The pain begins to dull. Or maybe you're just numb. And as sleep starts to overtake you, you whisper a quiet promise to yourself. Never eat licorice in Berlin again. The pain in your jaw fades just in time for the anxiety in your stomach to kick in. You need work. Not in a maybe I'll update my resume this weekend sort of way, but in a if I don't find a job soon, I'll have to start eating the wallpaper sort of way. So you do what everyone else in Berlin seems to be doing. You head to the Arbeitsamt, the unemployment office. The line wraps around the block. Men in worn suits and threadbare coats shuffle forward slowly, their faces a mix of exhaustion and blank hope. Women clutch paper forms like lifelines. The air smells of ink wool and boiled pessimism. You wait for over an hour, listening to murmurs in every imaginable dialect. One man behind you is a former opera singer. The one in front of you claims to have once worked for the foreign ministry. Now he just wants a delivery job. A woman farther up is an engineer who hasn't touched a blueprint in months. You all inch forward like you're boarding a very slow, very disappointing ride at an amusement park designed by Kafka. Inside the Arbeitsamt, is a sea of desks, paper, and sighing. The clerk you're assigned to doesn't even look up. Name, you give it. Experience. You fumble through your personal history like a bad actor in a silent film. The clerk sighs again and stamps something with exaggerated boredom. He offers you a list of job postings, most of them crossed out. Too late, he says. Everything goes fast these days. Faster than the money. You ask about anything still available. Window washer on the 3rd floor of the police building. Or piano tuner. Do you play piano? You shake your head. Doesn't matter. No one can afford pianos anymore anyway. He shrugs. Try again tomorrow. Or don't. Up to you. Historians still argue whether Weimar Germany's massive unemployment was inevitable after World War I, or if it was worsened by poor policy. But on the ground for people like you, it just means standing in a long line, getting nothing, and leaving hungrier than you arrived. Back outside, the man who claimed to be a diplomat lights a cigarette and offers you one. You shake your head. Smart, he mutters. Harder to afford hope when you're addicted to something. You wander for hours. Job posters flap on every telephone pole, most already torn, overwritten, or graffitied into satire. A flyer reads, "Work, pay, food." Also maybe happiness. You're not sure if it's a joke or an ad. You try a few businesses in person. A factory gatekeeper tells you they've already laid off half the floor. A printer says he'll pay you in cigarettes and vinegar. A tailor offers a day's work in exchange for you pretending to be his nephew during a tax inspection. Tempting. You end up back at Alexanderplatz by early evening watching a man sketching caricatures for coins. His subjects look tired, but they laugh anyway. Laughter like inflation seems contagious in this city. A boy about 12 is sweeping the steps of a theater. You ask if they're hiring. He looks you up and down, not unless you can sing, dance, and speak Polish. You can't. Then no. By now your feet ache. You sit on a bench beside a man reading a book with no cover. He offers no greeting, just a gentle nod. You glance over. The book's pages are actually old ration cards stitched together. He's not reading. He's remembering. A loudspeaker crackles to life across the plaza. Tomorrow's bread prices will be posted by 10 a.m. No one reacts. No one even looks up. You walk back to your flat, past a queue for soup that snakes around the block. A sign reads, "Free, but bring your own bowl." Someone has added, and maybe a sense of humor. Inside your building, the stairwell feels steeper than usual. You pass your violinist neighbor. This time he's not playing, just sitting, staring at the wall. You nod. He doesn't. You collapse onto your mattress, shoes still on. You didn't get a job. You didn't even get close. But you didn't give up either. In Berlin, that still counts as a kind of success. Outside, the pigeons coo like they're employed. You close your eyes and dream of paperwork. The ache in your feet is still there when you wake, but today you've decided to do something different, something culturally enriching, something to lift your morale, even if only briefly. You head for the nightclubs. Not because you're particularly eager to dance, let's be honest, you're still traumatized by the tram schedule, but because in Berlin, cabaret isn't just entertainment, it's survival. The sun is just beginning to set when you approach one of the more famous venues. The sign out front reads, "Zum blauen Engel, the Blue Angel." and features a painted cherub who looks suspiciously like he's holding a cocktail. A velvet rope hangs outside, patrolled by a doorman in a feathered hat who looks like he's fought in 3 wars and lost all of them. You slip inside, handing over a few crumpled bills and your last trace of dignity. The air changes immediately, thick with smoke, perfume, and something floral that might be gin or just spilled regret. A low piano riff snakes its way through the crowd. Red velvet curtains hang heavy over the stage, and the lighting is so dim you can barely find your seat. You sit at a wobbly table near the back. The tablecloth is torn. The candle is fake, but no one notices. All eyes are on the spotlight. The show begins with a bang, literally. A drum roll crashes into a trumpet fanfare, and out struts the MC, a tall figure in sequins, top hat, and eyeliner thick enough to survive a flood. Meine Damen und Herren, they purr, and everyone in between. Welcome. You glance around. The audience is a strange mix. Veterans with eye patches, young men in borrowed tuxedos, housemaids in makeup borrowed from their employers. A woman in pearls clinks glasses with a man in suspenders. They might be spies, or married, or both. Historians still argue whether cabaret was a rebellion, a distraction, or a mirror held up to society. In truth, it was all 3. These smoky stages were Berlin's nervous system channeling its anxiety, its hope, and its deeply inappropriate sense of humor. The first act features a man dressed as Kaiser Wilhelm, singing about his mustache falling off. The second is a tap-dancing nun with a banana. No one explains it. No one needs to. The third act sings a torch song about inflation in minor key while slowly peeling an onion. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's true. A waiter slides a drink toward you. It's neon pink and hisses slightly. You drink it anyway. Tastes like strawberries and chemical accidents. You don't care. The performer on stage locks eyes with you mid-verse. You, they purr, look like someone who knows the value of a good distraction. You blink. They wink. The crowd claps. You have no idea what just happened. A woman at the next table leans over. First time she asks. You nod. Don't worry. By the end of the night, you'll be whistling war songs in your sleep and forgetting how rent works. She's not wrong. As the night rolls on, the acts get weirder. One man juggles glassware while reciting tax codes. Another plays Beethoven, using only spoons. A trio dressed as sausages performs a ballet about class struggle. No one questions it. Berlin doesn't ask why. It asks, why not? You find yourself clapping, laughing, swaying. The pain in your jaw, the weight of unemployment, the sour smell of cabbage. It all fades just for a moment. That's the thing about Weimar Berlin. It's crumbling, yes, but it knows how to party on the ruins. By the time you stumble out onto the street, the stars are hidden behind a haze of smoke and possibility. The tram screeches past again. You don't even flinch this time. Someone lights a cigarette beside you and says, tomorrow the economy might collapse. But tonight, we dance. You nod, your feet sore. Your stomach empty, but your heart slightly full. And as you limp home past shuttered shops and half-heard music leaking from basement bars, you realize you didn't come here to survive. You came here to live. And for one absurd, glorious night, you did. The morning after your foray into Berlin's glitter-dusted underworld is complicated. Your head is pounding like a newspaper printing press. Your stomach is suspiciously quiet, and you wake up with a feather in your pocket. You don't own anything with feathers. You sit up slowly and blink at the peeling wallpaper. It seems to wink back. There's an odd imprint on your cheek, probably from the cheap pillow, possibly from a cocktail napkin you fell asleep on. Either way, you're upright. That counts as progress. Today's mission: education, culture, maybe some peace and quiet. You decide to visit the university. On the way, you pass posters for lectures with titles like From Empire to Absurdity, German Politics 1, and Nietzsche. What was that about? You arrive at Humboldt University and discover it's less Hogwarts, more ideological free-for-all. Students in worn jackets huddle beneath statues of long-dead thinkers, arguing about the future like it's a group project no one can agree on. Inside, the halls are cold, wide, and echoing, lined with bulletin boards, papered in overlapping manifestos. One reads, "Capitalism is a virus." Another, "Join the Youth for Lenin Choir, now with harmony." You try to read a schedule, but get interrupted by a man who asks if you're with the Americans. You say no. He seems disappointed. You drift into a lecture room hoping to blend in. The professor is halfway through a talk on modern philosophy and the decay of the rational self. You try to take notes but find yourself sketching a picture of your bed instead. A student raises their hand and accuses the professor of being too moderate. Another yells that he's a reactionary. The professor sighs, drinks from a chipped teacup, and says, "Good. Keep yelling. It means you're learning." The conversation spirals. Names are dropped like hot coals. Hegel, Marx, Freud, Goethe, until a woman in the back declares literature is a conspiracy. The room pauses. Then someone claps. Historians still argue whether Berlin's universities in the 1920s were engines of progress or echo chambers of chaos. You'd say both. The library at least is quiet. You try to visit, but it's been taken over by a spontaneous reading of Brecht's latest play. Everyone's crying. No one has read the ending. You exit into a courtyard where a man in a lab coat is feeding pigeons and explaining quantum theory to anyone who'll listen. You listen. You don't understand. But it's soothing. The pigeons seem fascinated. A group of young revolutionaries passes by handing out hand-printed newspapers. One glances at you and says, "Join the movement." You ask which one. She shrugs. "Any of them. But pick fast." You find a bench near a fountain with algae where two men are debating economics, loudly. One insists the gold standard is a capitalist trap. The other says it's the only thing keeping shoes on feet. A third just wants to talk about Wagner operas. You pretend to read your newspaper. Back on the street, you realize how many of Berlin's conversations begin as intellectual discourse and end as interpretive dance. You pass a corner where students are acting out scenes from Faust in mime. You're not sure Goethe would approve or understand. Your stomach grumbles again. You haven't eaten since the mysterious cabaret night. You stop at a student cafe. The menu offers two things: lentil soup and theoretical sausage. You pick the soup. It tastes like compromise. The woman behind the counter tells you she's studying criminology, but also does tarot. She flips a card. The Tower, she says. Fitting. You nod, like you know what that means. As the afternoon wears on, you find yourself strangely comforted. The world may be on fire, but at least here everyone agrees it's burning, loudly, with footnotes. By the time you leave the university district, your brain hurts. Not in a bad way, in a used way, like you've been thinking at high speed in a second language while sleep-deprived and possibly malnourished. You walk back through the dusk, past booksellers packing up unsold volumes, past a street violinist playing Mahler like it's a threat. The city breathes unevenly, noisily, brilliantly. You return to your room with a second-hand pamphlet on Spinoza, a bruised apple, and a vague suspicion that you might have joined 3 different political factions without realizing. You lie down, you close your eyes, you dream of professors shouting, pigeons nodding, and someone whispering, "Everything is a symbol, even the lentils." Berlin's version of peace. You wake up to music, real orchestral, floating in through the window, like some ghost of civilization. Curious and hopeful, you follow the sound. It leads you toward Berlin's cultural pride, the Opera House. Tonight you decide you'll taste high society. Not just the smoky basement cabarets or philosophical cafes, but the velvet-seated, chandelier-draped realm of powdered faces and practiced applause. You're going to the opera. First problem, your clothes. Your only outfit still smells faintly of cabbage and philosophical despair. But this is Berlin, where fashion is interpretive. You dust yourself off, tuck in your shirt, and hope dim lighting will do the rest. At the entrance, the ticket taker eyes you with that special kind of upper-crust disdain only opera ushers and angry cats possess. But your money's good, barely, and soon enough, you're inside, swept into a foyer of mirrors and murmurs. The chandeliers above you glitter like they've never heard of inflation. Everything here feels heavier. The perfume, the expectation, the conversations laced with diplomatic names and veiled insults. You find your seat high up, far back. So far back you suspect you might technically be sitting in another postal district. The cushion is stiff. The man beside you smells like pipe smoke and silent judgment. The lights dim. The overture begins. And for a moment, just a moment, you are suspended in awe. The violins weep, the horns declare. The sopranos ascend like human firecrackers. It's Rigoletto, or maybe Der Freischütz, or maybe some experimental mashup of both. Berlin does that, blends chaos with genius. The set design is lavish. Gilded columns, painted forest backdrops. A man in a powdered wig dramatically dies mid-area. Someone in the audience whispers too soon, but you're absorbed completely until you realize your coat is gone. You panic. You remember draping it over the back of your chair. Now it's not there. You glance around. The pipe smoker shrugs. A woman behind you is suspiciously cozy in something brown and woolly. You don't confront her. This is Berlin. People duel over theater reviews. Instead, you slouch lower and try to focus on the finale, which features at least 3 betrayals, 1 cursed dagger, and a mezzo-soprano who hits a note so high your teeth vibrate. As the curtain falls, the applause erupts. You clap too, partly because of the performance, partly because you want people to think you understood it. You shuffle out with the crowd, shoulder to shoulder with bureaucrats, bohemians, and bored aristocrats. Outside, under the gas lamps, the cold bites your arms. No coat, no refund, just the bitter breeze of bourgeois disappointment. You consider filing a report with the police, but that's a bit like asking the wind to return your hat. You pass a constable on the corner, but he's too busy mediating an argument between two shouting men, one dressed as a priest, the other in a swimsuit. You move on. Historians still argue whether Berlin's cultural elite in the 1920s were visionaries preserving beauty, or escapists sipping champagne on a sinking ship. Tonight, it felt like both. You wander down Unter den Linden, coatless but humming. The opera lingers in your bones. You duck into a small bar to warm up, where a man is playing the same aria on a harmonica. You give him a few pfennigs, and he nods without stopping. At the back table, two women in flapper dresses discuss the finer points of Schoenberg and scream laugh at the idea of harmony. You try not to eavesdrop. You fail. It turns out one of them pickpockets coats only if they're wool. You silently wish her well. Back at your building, your violinist neighbor is playing the same tune from the opera. You pause. He pauses. You both nod like veterans of a particularly dramatic battle. You crawl into bed, arms still chilled, but soul slightly warmed. And you dream absurdly of chandeliers falling in slow motion, arias sung underwater, and a woman in your coat, dramatically declaring, "This is my role now." Berlin takes. Berlin gives. Usually in reverse order. You wake up, determined to buy nothing, speak to no one, and keep your hands firmly in your pockets. Why? Because yesterday you lost your coat, and today someone tries to sell you a tank. It starts innocently enough. You're wandering through one of Berlin's open-air markets near Wedding, just trying to kill time. It's the kind of place where stalls sell everything from dented pots to taxidermied owls, all under tarps that flap in the wind like wet laundry. At first glance, it feels like a yard sale run by surrealists. You pass a man selling eyeglasses with only one lens. Another table offers spoons labeled pre-war optimism. A woman tries to sell you a single shoe and insists the other one is overrated. You pause at a stall full of books. Cheap, dusty, mostly political or scandalous. A copy of Mein Hund und ich, My Dog and I, sits next to How to Marry a Baron Without Dying. Useful, maybe. Then comes the tank. You hear the words first fully functional, minor dents, mostly ornamental. You look up. A squat man in a stained trench coat stands beside what is unmistakably the hull of a World War I tank. It's covered in ivy. A pigeon is nesting in the cannon. You stare. He smiles. She runs. Sort of. Perfect for neighborhood patrols or making a point at family reunions. You ask if it's legal. He shrugs. In Berlin, everything's legal until someone reports you. You glance around. No one seems alarmed. A couple is even eyeing the treads, appreciatively as if comparing them to their current buggy. A child climbs the side and shouts Freiheit, freedom. His mother claps politely. You politely decline and move along. Berlin's black market is legendary and completely open. In the 1920s, with post-war demilitarization in full swing, military surplus flooded the civilian world. Typewriters, boots, medals, gas masks, even horses once used in cavalry. Everything was for sale. Historians still argue whether this was necessity rebellion or just good old-fashioned hustle. At the next stall, someone offers you Army field rations from 1917. Still good, he says. Probably. You keep walking. Next, you find a vendor selling wedding dresses and gas masks side by side. For any occasion, she says. You nod and move on quickly. You pass a group of men huddled around a crate. Inside watches, dozens of them. Some tick, some don't. All are guaranteed genuine by someone's uncle. You ask how much. The vendor says 1 watch, 5 eggs. Unless it's for love, then 4. You don't have eggs or love. So you move on. Down the next alley, there's a stall selling art sketches of the city in charcoal paint and pure spite. One features a tram attacking a cafe. Another shows 2 people embracing while their building burns. You almost buy one. You don't know why. A woman in a blue coat stops you. You look like someone who needs a sword. She's holding one rusty, dented with a tag that says Napoleonic-ish. You ask if it's sharp. She says sharp enough to make a point. You almost say yes. You almost say a lot of things. Eventually you reach the end of the market where a man with a megaphone announces an auction. The items: a taxidermy dog, a crate of mismatched buttons, a stolen tram bell, and something French. Bidding starts at 3 potatoes. You turn back. Enough capitalism for today. On the way home, you pass a boy selling newspapers. The headline reads, "Black market prices stabilize. Crime up, spending down." Below it, a cartoon of a man juggling sausages labeled hope, debt, and vodka. You buy a copy. Not because you want the news, because you're cold and you need something to stuff under your shirt. Back at your building, the violinist is silent. Instead, you hear him tinkering with something heavy. You peek into the hallway and see a cannon wheel in front of his door. You don't ask. You climb the stairs, newspaper tucked under your coatless arm, hands numb, but pockets still your own. And that, in Berlin, counts as a small victory. You tell yourself you're just going for a walk. That's how it starts. Just a walk through Berlin's gray morning haze, past shattered cobbles and crumbling facades, toward anywhere that doesn't remind you of how broke, cold, and coatless you are. And then you meet her. She's leaning against a brick wall, beneath a defaced poster for a play you're sure has already closed. Short hair, under a newsboy cap, cigarette perched between 2 fingers. Boots scuffed like they've danced on rooftops. She's humming something probably Kurt Weill, but it sounds like trouble. "Hey," she says, "you look like someone who needs direction." You raise an eyebrow. "You offering a map?" She grins. "No. But I know where things are." Before you can respond, she starts walking. And you follow. Not because you trust her, but because Berlin rewards curiosity and punishes hesitation. She leads you through a series of alleys and courtyards you didn't know existed, past hidden cafes where artists sketch in cigarette ash and half-asleep waiters recite poetry for tips. At one point you pass a dog with a monocle. No one comments. Eventually you arrive at a small flat above a shuttered bakery. She unlocks the door with a key she pulls from her boot. Inside the room is a contradiction, neatly made bed shelves full of books about revolution and astronomy, and a pistol on the windowsill. "Don't worry," she says, catching your glance. "It's not loaded." Usually, you sit. She pours 2 cups of something herbal and vaguely illegal. The mug says, "Property is theft." You don't ask whose. "Name's Lena," she says, "but don't use it too loud. I'm also Anna Gisela and sometimes Friedrich, depending on the week." You ask what she does. She shrugs. "Student. Courier. Sometimes I help people disappear." You pause, cup halfway to your lips. "Disappear?" She winks. "Only the ones who want to." The world outside her window buzzes. Somewhere nearby, a tram moans its discontent, and a couple screams about paint. You're too intrigued to leave. She shows you a map of Berlin, covered in red lines and tiny symbols. These are safe houses. These are where the police don't look. This, she taps a spot near Kreuzberg, is where people still believe things can change. She leans back and eyes you carefully. "You're not from here." You shake your head. "But you're learning. You've got that look, half curious, half exhausted." "Is that bad?" "No," she says. "It's very Berlin." Historians still argue whether the rise of politicized youth in Weimar Germany was a product of desperation or idealism. Lena, it seems, is both. She quotes Rosa Luxemburg and listens to jazz. She hides radicals and makes fun of them. She carries a gun, but prefers words. And somehow, over the next few hours, you talk about everything: art decay, dreams, trauma, potatoes. She tells you about growing up in a house with 5 siblings, 1 bed, and a mother who believed in ghosts. You tell her about the coat you lost and the tank someone tried to sell you. She laughs. You're adapting. Later, she walks you back through the fog, pointing out which corners to avoid and which pigeons are spies. At one point, she pulls you into a doorway just before a group of uniformed men marches by. You don't ask who they are. You don't need to. As you approach your street, she stops. "Don't tell anyone you met me," she says. You nod. "But if you need help," she adds, handing you a slip of paper with an address and a single word: Comet. You ask what it means. "Something bright," she says. "And fast. Doesn't stay in one place for long." Then she's gone, slipped into the crowd, lost in the fog like a myth. Back in your room, you stare at the paper for a long time. Outside, the violinist plays something slower than usual, softer. You lie back on your lumpy mattress and close your eyes. Lena's voice still echoing in your ears. You wonder if she was real. But the note in your hand says otherwise. You're halfway through your morning bread, that strange intersection between sponge brick and national disappointment, when you hear the first whistle. Sharp, long, followed by boots. You freeze mid-chew. There's a knock on a door down the hall, then another, then shouting. You rush to the window. Below, a squad of police officers in long coats and stiff hats are storming into your building. Neighbors poke their heads out cautiously. One old woman whispers, "They're sweeping again." You duck back and sit still. You remember what Lena said, "Don't tell anyone you met me." Her voice rings like a warning bell in your chest. The hall outside your door erupts into heavy steps and louder voices. You catch phrases through the keyhole documents. Suspected materials, where were you last night? You're not the target, not today. But still your fingers twitch nervously toward the scrap of paper she gave you. Comet. You tuck it deeper into your shoe, heart hammering. After 20 minutes, the noise recedes. Someone's crying. Another door slams. You don't go out, you wait. When the quiet finally returns, it's the sort that makes your bones vibrate. You slip into the hallway and tiptoe past your neighbor's door, now hanging open. The violin is on the floor. No sign of him. Berlin. Your learning is not just unpredictable, it's watching. And it's not always clear who's holding the binoculars. You venture out later, mostly for air and the illusion of control. Along the way, you notice things you didn't before. Posters with slogans about loyalty, chalk marks near door frames, a shoe left on a step, tied to a string of breadcrumbs that leads nowhere. On a street corner, you pass two men in heated debate. You slow to listen. One is shouting about safety, the other about freedom. A third man stands quietly behind them, taking notes. The tension is baked into the walls. You step into a newsstand. The front pages are bold again. Police raid uncovers. Spy network mayor denies involvement. Woman found with typewriter and gun. You can't breathe for a moment. You buy the paper anyway. Information is currency, even when it costs you peace of mind. At a cafe, you overhear someone say, "Better paranoid than disappeared." No one laughs. You sip your coffee, hands shaking. The woman behind the counter watches you too long. A man walks in, doesn't order, and leaves. Another customer folds a napkin into a crane and stares at the door the entire time he drinks. You start wondering if your thoughts are even your own anymore. Historians still argue whether the fear that saturated Berlin in the 1920s was warranted or imagined. Surveillance was real. So was betrayal. But the feeling, the skin-prickling tension, that was the most real of all. You think of Lena again. The gun on the windowsill. The way she smiled with one side of her mouth, like she didn't fully trust Joy. You wonder if she's safe. You keep walking. The day wears on in a blur of whispered conversations and too many locked doors. You make it back to your room and immediately check your shoe. The note's still there. Still says Comet. Later, when night finally falls, you can't sleep. You lie in the dark, listening to creaking floors, distant arguments, and the occasional soft footstep that might be nothing. You replay every word Lena said, every face in the cafe, every sentence in the newspaper, and then you hear it. Outside, faint but deliberate, a knock. 2 taps. A pause, then one more. You don't move. The knock doesn't come again. The city returns to silence. But your heartbeat does not. You don't open the door. Not that night, not after the knock. Instead, you lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, as if it might provide an answer. You try to tell yourself it was nothing, just plumbing or the wind or a mistake. But the rhythm was too specific, too deliberate, too much like a password. By dawn, you haven't slept, just blinked slowly through the dark hours, tracking shadows as they crawled across the room. When the light finally creeps in, it feels like a confession. You get up, dress quietly, and step out into the hallway. No signs of disturbance. The violinist's door is still ajar. Inside, silence and the strange scent of wax and metal. You close it gently, just in case. Outside, Berlin is already humming. The fog hangs low, softening the edges of buildings that have seen better centuries. The city smells of coal smoke and cheap perfume, two things that seem to power it equally. You start walking, unsure of your destination, but before long you notice something unsettling. You're being watched. At first it's just a glance, a man across the street pretending to fix his coat while keeping one eye on you. Then a second person, a woman at a newspaper stand who doesn't blink as you pass. Later, you catch a figure reflected in a shop window standing still as you move. Once is coincidence. Twice is paranoia. But 3 times, you duck into an alley, take a sharp turn and double back. The man in the coat is still behind you now, pretending to examine a broken umbrella. You stare long enough that he looks up. He doesn't smile. You walk faster, heart thumping, palms sweating. You're not important, you tell yourself. You're not anyone. But maybe knowing someone who is, that's enough. You take a tram heading west. No idea where it goes. Just away. On board the car rocks gently like a cradle on rails. You watch your reflection in the glass, trying to look calm. Everyone else stares ahead or dozes. No one makes eye contact. The city rolls past tenements, statues, half-demolished churches. You see a mural of Karl Marx with a balloon tied to his wrist. Someone's idea of a joke, maybe. Or hope. You get off 2 stops early and cut through a park boots, crunching over frost-bitten leaves. A child chases pigeons in circles. For a second, everything feels normal. Then the child stops, looks at you and runs the other way. You find a quiet bench. You sit, breathe, and there he is. Across the park, the same man. He's pretending to read a newspaper but holding it upside down. You stare until he lowers it. His face is blank, calm, familiar. Too familiar. You don't know him, but he knows you. Historians still argue whether surveillance in Weimar Berlin was centralized, fragmented, or just deeply improvised. The city was a kaleidoscope of factions: communists, monarchists, anarchists, nationalists, each with its own spies, its own secrets, and sometimes its own hit lists. You clutch the note in your shoe like a charm. Comet, still folded, still a choice. You rise slow and casual and begin walking again. This time with intention. You dodge into crowded streets, through arcades, past trams. You double back again, turn corners without thinking. Eventually you stop. Look around. He's gone. You don't feel relief. Just cold. Back in your apartment, you jam a chair under the doorknob and collapse into the bed, clothes still on. Your stomach is empty. Your eyes are burning. You close them anyway. Sleep doesn't come easy. When it does, it's in fragments. Dreams of empty trains and spinning coins and a long hallway where everyone walks backward. You wake in the late afternoon, the light already dying. There's a knock again. Not on your door. Somewhere down the hall. 3 knocks this time. Vaz. Then footsteps. Fading. You sit up. Still alive, still here. But so is someone else. You wake up before dawn, tangled in sweat and dread. The sky outside is bruised gray, the color of old metal and worse intentions. You don't bother changing clothes. You just splash water on your face, jam your shoes on, and slip out of the building like someone trying not to exist. You need something simple, something ordinary, something human. You go looking for food. It's Sunday, and Berlin is hungover in every possible way. The streets are quieter than usual. No shouting students, no marching boots. Not even a pigeon riot. Just fog chimneys, puffing weakly, and the faint smell of someone burning yesterday's newspaper for heat. You follow the smell of broth to a long line that snakes around a Lutheran soup kitchen. There are children in threadbare coats, men with faces carved by wind and war, and women who once probably wore pearls now clutching dented tin cups. No one speaks. The silence is heavy but not hostile, just tired. You shuffle forward with the others, steam from the kitchen wafting out in slow, delicious waves. When you finally reach the front, a woman ladles something pale and thin into your bowl. She doesn't smile, but she nods. You sit on the curb, the bowl warming your hands more than your stomach. It tastes like salt and survival. Next to you, an old man picks at a crust of bread and mutters, "Was better during the war." You glance over. He has a medal pinned to his coat and eyes that haven't blinked in a while. "More honest then," he adds. Now it's lies in every direction, even the soup. He cackles, then falls quiet again. You don't ask what he means. You're not sure he knows either. After you eat, you wander. You find yourself in an apartment down the road, not yours, not anyone's in particular. It's been turned into a salon, sort of. Mismatched chairs, blankets for curtains, and a chalkboard with the words, "Tonight, the future of the Republic," scribbled under what appears to be a doodle of a horse wearing a monocle. You stay. The room fills slowly. A poet starts reciting something fierce and lovely about ashes. A painter unveils a canvas showing Berlin as a cracked eggshell with smoke pouring out. A woman plays piano with only her left hand. Then come the voices. A tall man stands and announces the Kaiser was a mistake, the war was a joke, and democracy is a lie wrapped in bureaucracy. Scattered applause. Another responds, "No, the real crime is forgetting the workers." Then someone else insists, "What about the farmers?" And another, "What about the artists?" Someone at the back shouts, "What about breakfast?" Everyone laughs. Then no one does. You listen, head tilted, wondering if you've learned anything. Or just heard everything. Historians still argue whether Berlin's salons helped shape public discourse, or simply gave people an excuse to drink tea and shout. But in this room it feels real, loud, messy, alive. You don't speak, but you nod a lot. It's enough. Later, as people begin drifting out, you notice a woman sketching something in a notebook. You glance over, she's drawing everyone in the room, except she's given them wings, broken ones. You meet eyes. She winks. You step outside into the cold again. It's dark now. Your breath fogs like smoke signals. You pass a bakery where someone's arguing with the baker about philosophy and yeast. Down the street, a man with no shoes plays Bach on a harmonica. A child paints protest signs in chalk, misspelling every third word. You smile. You don't know why. Maybe because despite everything, poverty, fear, chaos, people here try. They fight, they gather, they eat soup and sing out of tune and argue over art like it matters. And maybe it does. Back home, the hallway is silent. The violinist's door is closed. You see no strange shadows, no tailing footsteps, just the hum of old wood and tired pipes. You slip into your room, pull the blankets up, and as sleep edges in, you feel something strange and unexpected. Not safety, not peace, but a kind of belonging. The newspaper hits your doorstep with the weight of a small brick. You didn't subscribe. No one does. In Berlin, newspapers find you. You pick it up your fingers, instantly coated in cheap ink. The front page screams, "Scandal in Parliament Minister found with dancer dog and 5 kilos of sauerkraut." Below that, a smaller headline reads, "Streetcar derails. Mayor blames socialists. Socialists blame mayor dog uninjured." You blink. It's too early for this. The rest of the front page is a chaotic mix of bold fonts and dramatic phrases: murder, betrayal, financial collapse, a new play about umbrellas. You flip through to page 3. Someone wrote an opinion piece comparing the economy to a slowly disintegrating pretzel. Berlin's press, you've learned, is many things: relentless, hysterical, creative, and possibly written under the influence of something potent. It's as if every edition is trying to win a bet for most dramatic headline. You sit at a cafe with your paper, nursing a watery coffee and a pastry so stale it might be considered a weapon. At the table next to you, a couple argues over astrology and urban planning. Behind you, a man mutters stock prices into his teacup like it's a telegram. You glance at the classifieds. Lost one belief in democracy. Found monocle, slightly cracked. Possibly cursed. Wanted editor with backbone and bullets. A page near the back lists theater reviews, most of them savage. "This play made me question the existence of joy," one critic writes. Another simply states the costumes were louder than the script. It's also exhausting and hilarious. You try to tune it out, but you're sucked in. The letters to the editor are especially wild. One complains about tram etiquette. "Sir, if a man insists on reciting Schopenhauer aloud while balancing a goose on his lap, He should at least offer the goose a seat. You nearly spit your coffee. Historians still argue whether Berlin's 1920s press helped inform the public or simply inflamed it. Likely both. There were over 90 daily papers in the city, at the time each shouting louder than the last. Truth danced with satire and panic pirouetted with prose. At another table, a woman with bright red gloves reads the same paper. She looks up and locks eyes with you for a moment, then points to the headline about the dancer and the dog, and mouths, "Again." You both laugh. In that moment, you feel oddly connected, co-conspirators in surviving absurdity. Then you spot it. Buried on page 6. Small fire damages. Bookshop near Alexanderplatz. No injuries. Political leaflets found at scene. Suspect fled. You freeze. You were there 2 days ago. Was Lena? You fold the paper slowly and slip it into your coat. Still not your coat, by the way. It's a threadbare thing you bartered for with someone's second favorite hat. But it has sleeves and pockets. And right now, those pockets hide a growing sense of dread. You walk the city differently now. Less like a visitor, more like someone who knows where not to step. You avoid doorways that feel too quiet. Windows with too many eyes behind them. You stay out of places that seem to hum with staged calm. But Berlin is loud where it shouldn't be, and quiet where it shouldn't be. You pass a statue wrapped in protest posters. A man shouting about bread prices while selling oranges. A woman painting a swastika into a urinal. No one stops her. No one cares. You buy a second paper just to confirm the first wasn't hallucination. This one has the same story. Only this time the headline is different. Suspected agitator escapes, may have been a woman. That's all it takes. 2 lines, your chest tightens, you walk fast. Back at your apartment, you lock the door, triple check the window, and open the newspaper again. You scan every word, every name. Nothing else. Just the fire. Just the leaflets. But it's not what's in the paper that scares you. It's what isn't. What isn't said. What's only whispered or not printed at all. That night, the violinist plays again. Something slow, something sad, something unfinished. You fall asleep with the newspaper still clutched in your hand, headlines running through your dreams like a circus parade of ghosts. And in the distance, barely audible, a printing press clatters on turning panic into print. You wake up shivering. Not the delicate kind of chill where you pull the blanket higher and drift back into dreams, but the deep, gnawing cold that feels like it's pressing into your bones with intent. You can see your breath in the air. Indoors. You check the radiator. It's given up. Not broken exactly, just resentful. You thump it once, twice. It hisses back like an angry cat. Then silence. You pull on everything you own, 2 shirts, a pair of mismatched socks, a scarf that smells like last week's lentils. Still, the cold cuts through like a telegram from Siberia. You decide you need warmth, actual warmth. So you go outside, which turns out to be even worse. The streets of Berlin are glazed in ice. Your boots have zero traction, and you do that slow, involuntary shuffle people do when they're pretending not to slip while absolutely slipping. A woman passes you in heels and doesn't flinch. Berliners, you head toward the public hospital, not because you're sick yet, but because you've heard they have heat, or at least functioning pipes. You tell yourself it's just to get warm. But halfway there, your nose starts leaking like a faucet, and your limbs ache in that familiar, dreaded way. By the time you make it to the building, you're dizzy. Inside, it's chaos. People packed shoulder to shoulder, coughing in stereo. A nurse glances at you and waves vaguely toward a line. You stand in it. You wait and wait and wait. The man behind you keeps muttering something about Russian soup and German lungs. You think it's a metaphor or a diagnosis. Finally, you reach the intake desk. The nurse doesn't look up. Name, you give it. Symptoms. Cold, you croak. She writes something and waves you through. No ID, no temperature check, no reassurance. Just the next name. Historians still argue whether Weimar-era public health was progressive or primitive. On paper, Berlin had universal health care. In practice, it had this overcrowded clinics, overworked nurses, and overachieving viruses. A doctor with eyes like wet paper towels listens to your chest. He nods slowly, hands you a small bottle of something amber, and says, "Don't drink it all at once, unless you want to sleep until Monday." You ask what it is, mostly hope he says with a little morphine. You take the bottle. Back outside, your joints already stiffen. You make it 3 blocks before sitting down on the steps of a bakery that's long since stopped selling anything warm. Your breath fogs, your fingers twitch. A woman offers you a sip of her schnapps. You nod. It burns like honesty. She smiles. "Used to be I'd catch colds from drafty halls," she says. "Now I just catch them from the government. You're too tired to laugh." But she does, loud and long. Later, you make it back to your room barely. You collapse on the bed and pull the blanket over your entire body like a shroud. You drink a tiny bit of the medicine. It tastes like burnt wood and medicine cabinet. Then the fever starts. It comes in waves, heat, then ice, then dreams, stitched together from coughs and old newspaper headlines. You hallucinate a conversation with the radiator. You lose an imaginary chess game to a pigeon. You dream you're back in the opera house, except everyone's in bathtubs, and the overture is just someone sneezing on loop. At some point, someone knocks. You don't answer. The walls pulse. Your teeth chatter Morse code. You lose track of time. You wake to daylight and silence. The fever's broken. Mostly, your pillow's wet with sweat. Or maybe it was snowing inside. Unclear. You're alive, though, more or less. And that means something. You sit up slowly, every joint protesting. The city groans. Outside, like it partied too hard without you. You survived the cold. Barely. Berlin didn't kill you today. You mark that as progress. You feel like a ghost. Not the cool kind that walks through walls and solves mysteries, but the frail, exhausted kind that drifts from room to room, looking for meaning in the wallpaper. Every breath is still a little labored, and your limbs feel like they're filled with wet sand. Still, you get dressed. Because in Berlin, if you lie in bed too long, the city forgets you. And worse, it replaces you. You step outside into the sour light of late morning. The air smells like coal smoke, vinegar, and something sweet you can't place. Maybe burnt sugar, maybe failure. On the sidewalk, someone's left a pair of shoes tied together by their laces hanging from a lamppost. You don't ask. You decide to visit an art gallery. You've heard it's free and heated. That's reason enough. It's tucked behind a butcher shop and a bookstore that only sells political pamphlets and erotic poetry. Often the same thing. The gallery entrance is modest. Inside, though, it opens up like a confession, high ceilings, soft light, and the subtle chill of curated indifference. You wander through rooms filled with art that looks like the aftermath of emotional earthquakes. One canvas is nothing but shades of gray, smeared in vertical despair. Another depicts a man screaming into a frying pan. A third shows Berlin itself, twisted, bleeding, dancing. A plaque nearby reads, "The artist painted this with soot wine and her ex-husband's memoir." You nod solemnly. That tracks. You find a bench and sit staring at a sculpture made entirely of spoons. You don't understand it. But then again, you don't understand most of your dreams anymore either. A tour guide walks by with a small group. You catch fragments, post-expressionist rage, commentary on economic violence. He died in a bakery queue. You close your eyes, not to nap, just to rest in a place where the world is still and no one's yelling about borders or bread. Berlin's art is like Berlin itself, raw, jagged, stitched together from ruin and rage, but still, somehow still beautiful. Historians still argue whether the Weimar art scene was a cultural revolution or a collective nervous breakdown with paintbrushes. Likely both. Eventually you leave the gallery, back to the noise. Outside, the streets buzz. A protest is brewing, not the angry kind, but the theatrical kind. A parade of students in costume marches past chanting slogans that rhyme but make no sense. One holds a sign that says, "Yes means." Maybe another beats a drum with a spatula. You laugh, then cough, then keep walking. You pass a cafe where a man reads aloud from a newspaper with growing indignation. The chancellor called the strike illegal, as if starving is a choice. The other patrons nod, sip and smoke. Further down, a bakery is having a buy one regret 2 sale. You consider going in, but you only have enough money for regret. You sit by a fountain that doesn't work anymore. Pigeons circle you like sharks. A man plays the accordion nearby, not for money, but because the silence makes him nervous. You ask him what he's playing. He says, "Something I made up just now. All the notes are from last year." It sounds like nostalgia dipped in mustard. You toss him a coin. He nods once, then keeps playing, eyes half closed. As the sun sets, you take the long way home through the alley where you once saw a woman selling dreams. By the hour, past the mural of Marx and the mailbox filled with poetry. Berlin isn't pretty, but it's alive. It's the kind of city that bleeds color into your thoughts, that scribbles in your margins, that shows you the cracked mirror and dares you to laugh. Back in your room, you light a candle. The violinist is playing again. This time, it's something gentle, almost a lullaby. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. Tomorrow might be worse. It probably will be. But today, for a few minutes, you breathed deep and felt the world inside art instead of anxiety. And that somehow feels like survival. Sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Not because of fear or even the cold, but because even your dreams are loud now. You drift off and find yourself riding a tram that never stops, surrounded by people reading newspapers with your face on the front. You try to get off at every station. None of the doors open. You wake up with your jaw clenched, blanket tangled around your legs like barbed wire. The violinist must have gone to sleep early. There's no music, only the soft, continuous rumble of Berlin breathing in its sleep. You step outside for air. It's after midnight, and the city has quieted just enough to let you hear the clocks. Somewhere a church bell tolls 2. Somewhere else a cat knocks over a bottle. You walk. The streets are coated in damp mist. Gas lamps glow like forgotten stars. You follow a path you've never taken, half on purpose, half on instinct. And then without meaning to, you arrive at the river. The Spree cuts through the heart of Berlin like a cracked ribbon, dark and unreadable at this hour. A few barges rock gently at their moorings. A woman in a fur coat walks her dog along the opposite bank. Neither looks cold. You sit on a bench and watch the water. It doesn't rush. It doesn't hesitate. It just flows. Like time. Like memory. A man shuffles past with a sack over his shoulder, humming a lullaby in a language you don't know. A few minutes later, he's gone, swallowed by fog. Then come the sirens. Distant. Rising, fading, rising again. You freeze. A tram screeches, a dog barks. Somewhere a glass shatters. You duck instinctively, though no one's chasing you. Not tonight. But you feel watched anyway. Berlin always watches. You make your way back through side streets. More murals, more posters. One reads, "We don't sleep, we endure." Another, "Silence is not neutral." A man sits outside a shuttered theater playing a violin with no strings. He nods at you like he knows your name. You don't stop. Back in your room, the candle has burned itself out. A curl of smoke hangs in the air like punctuation. You lie down, but sleep stays just out of reach. You hear voices in the building, not loud, not angry, just constant. Like murmured history being rewritten in real time. You remember something Lena said, "Even your dreams here will get political. Just give it a week." She was wrong. It took 4 days. You finally fall asleep just before dawn, and your dream begins mid-sentence. You're sitting at a table with no legs. Across from you, the chancellor is buttering toast with a fountain pen. The waiter asks if you'd like your future grilled or poached. You say fried, and he weeps. The wallpaper recites poetry. The chandelier falls in slow motion. You wake with your heart in your throat and the sheets twisted like rope. Just another night in Berlin. Historians still argue whether Weimar dreams reflected national trauma or just bad sausage. You think it's both. You get up, pull on your clothes, and go watch the sun rise. Because today is your last full day in this city. You don't know what that means yet, only that the end is closer than it used to be. And Berlin, loud, cracked coughing. Berlin isn't going to let you go quietly. The sun rises like it's embarrassed. Soft, low, barely present. The city stretches under it, still damp, still tired, but somehow still standing. You walk out into the day like someone sneaking into a museum. Just as it opens, careful not to knock over any relics. Your shoes squish slightly with every step. You're not sure why. You've stopped asking questions like that. Today is your last full day in Berlin. You tell yourself you'll take it slow. Just observe. Just listen. But Berlin doesn't allow passive observers. It pulls you in hands. First heart second. At the market square, a woman sells roses made of wire and wax. She hands you one for free. Everyone should leave with something beautiful, she says. You pass a boy reciting a poem to pigeons. It's awful, but the pigeons listen anyway. You walk past bakeries where nothing is baked, bars that never close, and shops that sell only shadows of what they used to be. You pass a church covered in scaffolding, the cross at the top, dangling by a thread. No one notices, or they've noticed too much. You stop at a cafe you've passed 100 times but never entered. Today you do. Inside, the walls are lined with mismatched paintings. Each one depicts the same bridge, but different seasons, different skies. All variations on permanence. You order tea. A man at the next table is sketching something frantically. You ask what it is. Propaganda, he says, but for good things. You nod like you understand. He tears the page out and hands it to you. It's a drawing of a person climbing out of a newspaper. You carry it with you. By midday, the clouds roll in. You find a square where musicians are warming up for a street performance. They play a slow, melancholy waltz. People gather, then disperse. No one claps. Everyone listens. You sit. You breathe. Berlin is quieter today. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but contemplative. Even the pigeons walk instead of flutter. Even the trams glide like they're trying not to wake anyone. At a bookstall, you spot a title that stops you, The City That Forgot Itself. The bookseller shrugs. No ending, she says. Author disappeared. Typical. As evening comes, the sky turns copper. The city looks gilded like it's been polished for one last moment of drama. You walk through it slowly, as if trying to memorize each crack in the wall, each flicker of gaslight. At a crossroads, you see Lena. Just for a second. She's across the street talking to a man in a gray coat. She doesn't see you, or pretends not to. You don't call out. Some things don't need revisiting. Some people are meant to disappear like fog at sunrise. Instead, you walk back to your apartment, your final descent into the rickety stairwell. The building breathes around you. The wallpaper still peels. The violinist plays something you don't recognize, joyful maybe, or just relieved. In your room, you find the scrap of paper still hidden in your shoe. Comet. You fold it once more, slide it into your pocket, and sit by the window. The lights of Berlin flicker like they're sending Morse code to the stars. The air is cold. Your hands are steady. You made it. You didn't flourish. You didn't thrive. But you endured. And in Berlin, that counts as winning. So now, as the last notes from the violinist trail off, and the city slowly exhales, another impossible day you breathe with it. The candle's low. The sky outside fades from copper to indigo. Even the pigeons are still. Let everything soften. The panic, the noise, the weight of remembering too much. Feel the hum of silence settle over the cobblestones like a blanket stretched across the bones of history. Outside Berlin shifts, but not urgently. The trams have gone quiet. The arguments have paused. Even the posters seem to whisper now. You lie down. Slowly. Gently. The mattress is still awful, but you no longer notice. It's familiar now. Like the city itself. Flawed, loud, unpredictable, but yours. For one long, strange day. Let the rhythm of breath replace the chaos of thought. Let the darkness outside wrap around you like velvet. No parades, no editorials. Just sleep. Just stillness. The last image. You hold a street lamp, flickering behind lace curtains casting light across a cracked teacup and the spine of a forgotten book. Nothing urgent, nothing dangerous, just quiet. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum and let your body release the day. Tomorrow will come. Or not. But for now, just rest. You've done enough. You've been enough. You are enough. End of script. Sweet dreams.